Okay, so what is a malware and what we'll be doing is dissecting a malware infected system or a malware and see what we can do with it, what all information we get from a simple file, or how may we recover from a malware attack.
One
So
thing
these are,
before that, you could share the prerequisites
yeah,
first.
yeah,
So
I have already shared a list of prerequisites in this chat of this Zoom. If you can check it. Okay. What we will be using is Remnex. It's a Linux distro for malware analysis, and there will be a victim machine of Windows 7. It's an OVA file which is freely available, given by Microsoft, so we can test our things on that. So the third thing is there are a couple of malware samples and tools which is hosted in this filetransfer.io. And if somebody is having any issues with downloading these virtual machines, there is another link where I have given all those virtual machines. There are actually I don't understand what language it is. So if you can please put it in English, it will be good.
uh, uh, Dave, can you post it in English? So this session will be in the more of an interactive session. So if any clarification needed in between for you, you can ask in between. And also we'll be having some hands-on workshop. So for that we need that prerequisites, like we need a machine which uh, support virtual machines, maybe like uh, yep, a hypervisor to set up the lab. So for that, as Maninder mentioned, we put the resources in the links. You could download it. Okay. Yeah, you could proceed.
Okay, so we could proceed to this. So what is a malware? Actually, malware, it is a collective name for malicious software, we can say. Malware can be anything from a virus to a deadly ransomware attack, or attack or a piece of software that affects some kind of SCADA environment, OT environment, operational system, and all. So anything which is malicious in nature and as a piece of software, we can call it as a malware. Okay. As it is written here, disrupt, damage, or gain unauthorized access to a computer system. So, what has malware done? What is the history of a malware? Actually, the malware, it was started as an experiment. We can say it is a creeper. There was a malware which was started as an experiment to see whether how a program goes from one system to a system automatically without any human interaction. So it was an experiment done by some scientists, and later it was developed into, we can say it as malware, first malware, and it was a creeper. So creeper, it was made in 1971. It was an experiment computer program written by Job Thomas, and it is considered as the first computer virus. What it does is it simply test out to a program might move between computers. So it is just it doesn't have any kind of advanced kind of uh, procedures or things which it can do, but it is just a simple program which shows how program files travel from one system to another through a network. So we can go forward to Morris worm. It was also developed in 1988, which was first computer virus, which we can see it as forward, like affected a lot of systems. So it was it was developed for ARPANET, which was a predecessor of what we call as internet today. So he was also this honor the author of this virus, Morris. He was the first person to be thrown to jail because of computer malware attack. He was the first convicted for his crimes in a cybercrime kind of view. So then there in 2000 there was an attack as I love you. It was infecting Windows PCs actually, and it was spread via emails. What it does is it goes forward from PC to Windows PC, from Windows PC, and from that PC it takes the email of this client and it sends an email with I love you as a subject and a love letter for you as an attachment, and it forwards mail to random users. There was an Suse. It was a Trojanos attacks. It also it was mainly for steal banking informations from softwares from operating systems. It does key logging and form grabbing kind of stuff. It was mainly affected on Windows systems. So there is Stuxnet. Uh, it was this one released in 2010 was a kind of a very uh, damaging kind of a virus or a malware we can say, because it affected OT systems, operational technologies, SCADA and all. What it does was it compromised Microsoft Windows system via USB, via USB and all. It attacks a network and it searches for softwares like Siemens Step 7 softwares, which was used to automating and monitoring electromagnetic equipments like electromechanical equipments such as SCADA systems and OT systems and all. And this particular system, like malware, it attacked a couple of nuclear programs of Iran, and it made a substantial damage to those were who in those programs, and later it was fixed. The WannaCry, like everybody knows about it. It was Eternal Brew, which was developed by NASA. It was made public by shadow brokers, uh, an anonymous team of hackers, and they made a ransomware out of it, and it was everywhere. It was I think it has infected around 230K computers globally, and mostly Windows computers. Even though that they have patched the Windows for 2 months back before this attack happened, people users who doesn't didn't patch their systems, they were attacked by this WannaCry.
Everyone, please note one thing. Those who download the malware samples and tools, don't open or run it in your Windows machines. It will damage your PC as it contain some original malwares. So
Okay,
make sure set up the lab before you run anything in your machines. Please be aware.
I'll take care. I'll take you to those file system and I'll show you how it is. So this is the folder which we will be getting. It is containing samples of all this, a lot of what we can say malwares. Okay, so here you can see. So there are malwares which are very very destructive in nature. So better you don't run it in your personal computers, or a computer in your office system, or don't give it to your kids, I can say. So what it does is it will encrypt all your data maybe, and you won't be able to get it back. So we are personally giving a exact correct method to set up a lab here, so we can test it properly without letting it loose. in that network or internet or something. So we should be very careful when dealing these malwares and virus, which we give us a uh, as an example, you can say. Okay, so we can go back to our session. So can somebody say what are the some types of malwares which we are found out in this? Windows user should be like very much aware of what are the type of malwares which are affecting their Windows systems.
Everyone, please feel free to talk. Don't hesitate. It will be more of an interactive session. So please ask questions in between and feel free to ask. Don't worry.
It's in fact a long session. If I am simply talking, and I might get bored. So people, you can uh, ask something. If you can add up something, you can do that also. Some okay. I don't think anyone has anything to say. So I'll move forward. What are different types of malwares? Like I said before, anything, any piece of software which is having a malicious kind of intent can be called as a malware. So we can start with viruses. Viruses, which are malwares, which are capable of replicating itself, spreading through the computers, and mm, like modifying other computer programs and inserting its own code. So if you have a virus and you have a Zoom, maybe that particular virus will take some codes and inject into that Zoom, and they'll probably capture your video or something like that. So virus are something that does, which can write codes on another program systems or utilize another program to do whatever it wants. So we can Trojans are what we can say is any malicious kind of software which misleads the user can be called as a Trojan. So if it is a virus also, it can be a Trojan also. uh, Maybe you'll see an APK as Candy Crush. You'll be like installing it and it will be working as Candy Crush, but in the background it will be leaking your data, taking your credit card details and all. We can call that as a Trojan. And WannaCry, as we say, ransomware. What is ransomware? It takes hold of important data of yours and asks a ransom for it. A particular $300 for WannaCry was asking $300. Later, it changed to $600. Like how much data you're worth, you have to pay it. Otherwise, you won't be able to reverse it back to that what it was in the original form. So ransomware is a piece of software which encrypts or holds your data, personal data, and asks for a certain amount of money. Worms are softwares, piece of software which travel through that network by exploiting operating system vulnerabilities. So you don't have to like personally copy paste this to another system. It works ominously, like it does it thinks it's on, it find it scans the network, it finds the computers, it exploits the operating system, and it gets in through. All it is done automatically without any manual interaction. And also all these types of like malwares, we can call it as worms. Rootkits. Rootkits are softwares probably found in Windows and Linux. We can make it from MSF console or like Metasploit and all. These are things which won't be like aware of that user, but it will be already in the user's computer, and we'll be holding a great amount of power over the client system. Spyware, almost almost all of us are internet users, and almost everything in the internet is a spyware. So without our knowledge, if software is taking data which is which is precious to us or just belong to us, then it is a spyware. Um, there are a lot of softwares which do spyware work, but for with a good intent, and there are softwares which do spy work without a good intent. So almost with these pieces of spywares, we can say we come across every day in the internet. There are keyloggers. Keyloggers are basically softwares which capture what we types in the keyboard. So every word, every search queries we do, every chat messages we do, everything which goes to a keyboard, it is captured by the keylogger, and it is sent to a particular command and control place where that attacker is listening to what we are saying. So what is a malware cycle? There is a four-step cycle for a malware. We can say it as infection to a host or computer system, persistence, where we are persisting in the system, maintaining the persistence and taking control of the system, communication. If we are in a network, if we are in a system, how this malware is going to communicate to his command and control. And the last step is command and control, where the attacker is sitting up with a dashboard or with a control panel where he is controlling these malwares and taking up the data and looking after all the files which we shared, or whatever he want to do with our system, he will be controlling it from the control command and control center. So as I said, infection, it is almost always a social aspect, such as infection can be done in any way. We can say like from a USB infection to a email attachment to uh, a vulnerable site, a website which we click some link, up a certain piece of code is run, and we will be infected with those malware. So infection can be from any way. Maybe some of our friend or a colleague, he'd be purposefully infecting us with these softwares without our knowledge. So then it comes persistence. Like I said, how the attack ensure the persistence of this piece of software in that affected system. We can say it is our system where this my system where this particular piece of software is there, and it should be persistent, like for the attacker to maintain the communication and take whatever he needs. Communication, like I said, it is a fundamental of a successful attack, communication. So a malware should be able to communicate to other infected system and its command and control. So if we are planning to make up a botnet, there should be thousands of systems in it. So all these botnets should be in communication with each other, and all these botnets should be in communication with the command and control also. So this is one of the basic, we can say, a fundamental step of a successful attack. And here comes command and control. Like I said, it is the top portion of the communication platform where the attacker is sitting, and he's like managing or controlling all these malwares or his bots. We can say it as his bots, and taking information or giving commands to do something, maybe planning a DDoS attacks from all these bots. So I hope till now everyone is aware of it. Any queries, any questions for you? Okay, we'll talk about a little about common infection methods. How how a user gets infected with this malicious piece of code. Okay, basically social engineering. Social engineering, as you know, you'll be this, we can say, is as a Trojan. Okay, so I'm having a website and I'm having couple of malicious code, and what I'll do is I'll give you an email, send you an email saying that look at this website, it offers this much free services. Probably you will be looking at this website, probably you will be looking some links. When you are clicking that link, what the application does is something else, but in the background maybe a file will be getting downloaded to your system, and that file will be a malware. So email attachments, malicious URLs, as such I said, malware string, it has advertising malware. Like we'll put up an advertisement. If you click that advertisement, it drops a malware into your system and you get infected to it. And through network protocols, it is like proper hacking, like RDP, remote desktop protocol, or SMB, server message block. Server message block, we can say WannaCry was a server message block vulnerability, and Eternal Blue. And WannaCry was using this SMB's Eternal Blue exploit attack to take control and like the spreading those ransomware across the globe. So network protocol attacks, drive-by download. Like I said before, there is a um, malicious, compromised website which belongs to a like a real user, but it is compromised by the attacker, from which where he shares his malwares. So there is a good website which I compromised it, and I'm trying to inject my own malwares into those website, where a normal user comes and clicks those buttons, and he gets infected from those attacks. And USB drives, portable media, your hard disk, your USB drives, your uh, like plugging it in a private, in a public computer, in a library, or in a what I can say, internet cafe kind of something, or and you're bringing back it to you, you're plugging into your personal computer, you get infected, because there are programs which are written to automatically write their code into a storage system like USB or something like that, or a memory card or something like that. So in 2016, Australian police, they were warning citizens of a USB sticks which was appearing in mailboxes and all, where these USB sticks were having like they were said to having Netflix application in it, but actually it was a ransomware. So anybody who's using those application, they'll end up with a encrypted encrypted drive or something. So we can talk about a little about a malware analysis. So, is anyone having any doubts till now? Let me see how many users are there. Anybody is having any doubts till now? Anything they have to ask? Okay.
I think you can proceed.
Okay. So I'll go through what I said, a small walkthrough of what I said till now. We talked about malware is. We talked about a couple of malware, Creeper, Morris, WannaCry, kind of couple of malwares. We talked about types of malwares like virus. What is a virus? What does it do? Trojans, ransomwares, worms. Then we talked about how vulnerabilities, how malwares is affecting systems, how it is transferred from one place to another. What are the process of a malware? What are the steps behind it? Like life cycle of a malware. What does it do? The communication between a malware and command and control. A couple of theory stuffs like that, and we'll move towards what is a malware analysis, or as if we are infected with a malware, or we get a piece of malware where which we have to look into it and check how it works, or what is this workflow, what it is do. What we do is a malware analysis. Okay. Basically, there are two types of analysis which we can say. Those are static analysis and dynamic analysis. We are not covering static analysis here, because Static analysis is basically decompiling that and decompiling the malware file and reading that code in it and coming to an understanding by the code what it does. Maybe it will be a compiled piece of code, so we have to go down to that assembly code level and do our research. Or if it is not compiled, some Python file or a Perl file, we can read the code, we can come to an understanding what it does. So basically we are not covering static analysis in this workshop sessions because it's a vast topic and we won't be able to cover it in a couple of hours or something. So it is basically for you to uh, study yourself. Tons of free data, like mm, free tutorials, things are available in the internet. You can go through them. So basically, we most of the things we'll be talking about will be dynamic analysis. So this is a small pictorial representment of our complexity. If a fully automated analysis we are carrying out, the complexity will be very less. When it comes to property analysis, that also complexity gets a little more higher, but not as much as it. Interactive behavior analysis also a little bit of complex because more technical terms and more tools comes into it, and we have to look into it. We have to spend more times with different tools and different procedures to find it. And last come reverse engineering, which we can say it as a static code analysis, where you will be reading the code, analyzing what it does without running, without basically static code analysis is without executing the file, we'll be analyzing what it does. So we'll talk about us how to do a fully automated analysis. As you can see, there are a couple of tools which you can use for that. We have Okay, I have put them in the chat box where you can see I have already taken them here. So this is hybridanalysis.com, and one more is there is this Cuckoo. So what we can do is, here we are having a sample of ransomware. What we are doing is Tesla Crypt. It is a very a recent ransomware, and it affected a lot of system. We'll be mostly using this for our testing purposes. So what I'll do is I'll take this and I'll drop it in this hybrid analysis, and I'll let it do it work. So this application is asking where to analyze it, because if it is an APK, we have to analyze it in an Android device. If this application, this particular malware is specified for Linux, we will be analyzing it on here. It is actually, this one is for Windows. So for I'm going taking Windows 7 64-bit and generate a public report. Okay, let's see what is the report that is giving. It is cwgp.exe. This is the file name. There's a malicious one. Threat score is 100 out of 100. The .exe, it is an executable. It is running in Windows, and you get its code. it's SHA, and how many indicators are there, malicious indicators, suspicious, informative indicators. So we'll check, if we check malicious indicators, we'll get a couple of more data. Remote access ransomware. This is the same one in sandbox.picker.com. It is the same file. It takes a little bit of time, so I have already done it, and that file looks like pretty much same to us. So these are a couple of softwares which we can do. This file is very suspicious, which we can do like code analysis, like analysis, automated analysis without any expertise in this field, like without any much more understanding of it. So there are a couple of other tools. I just used www.hybridanalysis and Sandbox. There are Amass, Anyrun, Analyze, like that. Couple of others are also there. So you can take a look into it. You can use the malwares which I have already provided in this uh, in the resources which we shared by the starting of this session. I hope all of you guys got it. Are you having any kind of doubts till now? Anybody? Because I feel like that I'm only talking and nobody is even listening. Any doubts? Anything?
No doubts.
Okay. Okay. So we'll move on a little hands-on. So okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a Windows machine, which is I'll tell you I'll give a small quick walkthrough how to set up a like a lab. Before that, I'll show you a quick review of what we are going to do. Okay, there is a tool called PE Studio. Okay, I hope everyone is aware of it. Otherwise, you can download it from the internet. It is available as it is for Windows. PE Studio. I hope it is a couple of MPs only, like two or three MP, so you can download it. So it works on Windows. So I'm opening up a Windows virtual machine, which is this, and this is a malware file. Okay, this is a malware. So what it is does is it is a executable static. It does a static property analysis of the malware which we are giving to this application. So it gives that what kind of application it is, the libraries, the imports, there are any strings in it, any suspicious type of libraries are included or not, or exported or not, what are the strings which is used in this application, like so many stuff from a little application I can show you there. So I dropped this malware to PE Studio, and this is what I get. So this is the MD5 hash of it, SHA-1 hash of it. We'll see the indicators of it. File contains another file. Okay, nothing specific. First of all, we have to do is libraries. Check the libraries. Crypt, it is using crypt. It is using NetAPI, DHCP, kernel32.dle. This kernel, this script, these are all suspicious DLL files, which are of in Windows but used by this particular piece of malware. So we can come to know these are both suspicious files which should not be used by this application, but rather it is using. So if we check the imports, we can see there is global allocation imported. There is virtual allocation imported by this file. So this global allocation, virtual allocation, as we can see in here, these all are suspicious properties of a particular file, and we are doing it. We are checking it. Mm, what we'll be checking next is strings. By strings, we can see if any IP addresses, which is rather in this property of this application, this malicious code, or a URL, or couple of other things like which we have written. IP registry keys, file names, URLs, anything we can, um, any data we can take out of this will be given in this string kind of parameter kind of thing. So you can see Windows, you can see something there, shutdown.exe. Okay, nothing that is interesting here. Let's see, we'll go down. There are a lot of random kind of data, which is if there is a lot of random data, it is also a suspicious file. We have to make sure that it is a suspicious file. Incorrect header check. See, here you can see send your Bitcoin wallet ID and personal installation to key email. Send 300 worth of Bitcoin to the following address and all. So basically, we know this is a malware, but without executing it, if we run through PE Studio and look at its process and what are the strings, what are the imports which this application has, we'll come to an understanding what it is doing, and what are the applications, what are the imports it is doing. Um, if it is a malicious kind of character is having to this application, this code or something like that, we'll come to an understanding from the PE Studio. There are a couple of other things also which we go through. Like I said, strings, which gives file names, URLs, IP address, registry keys, and something like that. Things like that. Embedded artifacts like libraries, which also said like file system network. Imports and exports, like I said, imports and exports. You can see here imports, virtual alloc, which is not a good import. If we see export, it is nothing but everything is exported to a dot text kind of location. I have to check where it is. It is ordinal. Okay. So next, interactive behavior analysis. This is much something which we have to uh, like interact with the piece of like this malware, and we have to examine its properties, and we have to execute this application and see what it is doing to this OS. Like if we execute a WannaCry ransomware into a Windows 7, and if we check from other side what it is doing to the system, we'll come to an understanding how much damage it can produce, or what it is doing. If it is calling an outside server, if it is everything is done inside this OS only. So if it is a ransom key, if it is not calling for a server, most probably the private key will be embedded in the code itself. So we can reverse the code and take that and put up with it, and maybe we can reverse engineer and take our data back. So there are a couple of things we have to do while interacting behavior analysis, which we'll be doing in a couple of minutes. And manual code reversing, like I said, reverse engineering, we have to decompile it. We have to use like debuggers and things, and reverse the code like it encrypted our system. We have to write a code to decrypt it. So we are moving forward to the hands-on of where we will be preparing this lab first. So I hope everyone has downloaded those files which I have given to you. So anybody who's not having those files with them? Hello?
Yeah, there is some question from Veena. So how can we know which website is providing safe download? For example, when I am using Photoshop online, etc., the return a file to download by us. Therefore, it was infected with malware. So that depend on the website we use. Normally, genuine website won't serve malware unless it is affected by some issues or vulnerabilities. So make sure to use legitimate websites and softwares. So if we are using a cracked version of application, there is possibilities of malware, and they will force us to move to some another links or something. Then that may be malwares. So make sure to use proper channels to download and safe and legitimate websites, and also genuine softwares. So what is the safest way to handle the samples in a virtual machine? So that we will cover in the lab section. Is there any suggestion or best practices to analyze or examine malware inside the container like Docker? That's up to us. Setting up an environment or lab is completely depend on these skills. So if you are okay with Docker, we can do that, but it's limited because most of the malwares and ransomwares nowadays having a virtual machine detection inbuilt in that, so it won't run in a virtual environment like a lab. So we have to overcome that to analyze the lab. So running inside a Docker won't be a possible at any time. So what we have to do is create a proper lab. The lab may be a machine which is completely isolated from the network, and it's isolated from the other machines or the network. That's mandatory. So if it's a physical machine, that is very good. But if that not possible, we can use build a lab inside the virtual box itself. That's what we do in the next sections. If how many of you have the ransomware samples and tools with you? Make sure not to run it in any Windows machines or open it in the Windows machine. Even though all the malwares have a zip structure, and it has password protected. Anyway, make sure not to open it in the Windows machines and click it. Then it will damage your machine. We have to create a lab to run those codes or run those samples. So we'll go through how to set up the lab next. So if you don't have the files with you, you can download it, and you can keep the links with you. You can download it later and try it from your end itself. So we'll be going through the hands-on from our end. You can follow us and ask. You could ask questions directly other than putting the chat itself. That's also fine. Yeah, there is possibilities like if you have a mounted machine or the Docker container have any connection with the host machine, there is possibilities of leaking. So you have to create a
What we'll be
cross.
doing is we'll be creating an internal network inside using VirtualBox. So these the network which we are having, it won't have any effect on our host system or on the internet, because it will be in there only. I'll be assigning two IPs for them, and it will be on scope of that only. It won't get out of there.
Okay, so yeah, Mani, proceed with the lab setup.
Okay, so I hope everyone is having all those files with them. Also for VM, make it isolated, Docker, don't expose the port. Okay,
It's all depend on the configurations, how we configure it. But analyzing a malware inside a Docker won't be that much sufficient or possible. Like so the malwares are very much different. So if it's a Linux malware, you can run it in a Docker machine or like. But if it's a Windows kind of, it's pretty much complicated inside the Docker itself. So yeah. Mm.
so this will be our network structure. Okay, we won't be using a Linux victim machine. We'll be only using a Windows machine because it is not needed. So we'll be having a Windows victim machine with an IP this and an another machine which I already sent you, Remnux. Remnux is an open source distro which helps us, which has pre-installed tools, malware analysis tools with them. So if I go through it, I can show. This is a Remnux system. Okay.
So from the diagram, it's pretty clear that the Windows machine is the victim machine and Remnex is the analysis machine. So in victim machine, we do the run the malwares in victim machine, and analysis machine is used to track what's happening inside the Windows machine and what are the things that sent to outside world, and everything is inside a host machine which is isolated by the VirtualBox. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So can I ask how many of you guys are having all those files downloaded with them now?
uh, uh, Everyone please feel free to talk, so then the session will be more interactive. So if you have any queries or questions or in between, you can ask.
So is
Um,
anybody having any difficulty in downloading those files, like a link not available or anything like that? Or
So the files are pretty big because the first one is Remnex distro. It's have around 2.1 GB size, and the second one is Windows 7 distro. It's having around 6 GB size. So if you have your own ISO with you, you can use that as well. Windows 7 victim machine is a 90 days trial version from Windows itself. It's a OVA file, so you can run it to open it in VirtualBox. Also, the Remnex also a OVA file which can be run in VirtualBox. So the
without any,
third link is malware samples. Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
it's having around 600 MB size. Uh, Downloading that itself will be sufficient now. Like it include the tools and the malware samples, and the other two links are for the backup. It's virtual machines. So at least you could download the samples, malware samples and tools. The link will be expiring in 24 hours, so you could keep that link and download it. Okay. Yeah. Money for.
Okay. So this will be a network structure. This is my host system, and I'll be using a hypervisor. It will be VirtualBox. Okay, this will be our hypervisor, and I'll be having two systems. One is Remnex, and one is Windows 7. This Windows 7, I have created it with a snapshot. So whenever I'm restarting it, I'll get to that last latest. I'll show you how to do that. So
So please make sure that when you create a VM, keep that um the first installation. Make sure to take a snapshot of it and set the machine in the VirtualBox configuration in such a way that whenever you restart the machine, it will restore the snapshot state of snapshot. So even if the machine is affected with any malware, it will be reloaded back to the original state.
We can do is you can right click and take a snapshot. Here it is. Usually snapshot and you can say current state and start it. So this is one snapshot and this is a clone of that. So if I ran a particular malware on this Windows 7, I can access if something happens here, I can change it back to the position it was in the beginning. So Rumnext also, what you can do is it is a OVA file. It is simply double click to that file. It will be directly open into this virtual machine and you can import it and it will be on your virtual machine and you can start running it, click it and here you can run it. So I'm here already. So as of now, I have my host system, which is what I'm a Kali Linux, which I'm using. I have a malware analysis system, which is Rumnext, and I have a Windows system, which is a victim. Okay, so now we'll talk about the networking of it.
Silva, we are explaining it.
Yeah, we are explaining it. So we are having two systems. What I'll do is I'll take the Windows in settings. I'll go to network and I'll change it to adapter one. I'll change it to internal network. Okay. There will be a name which will be automatically, what can I say, automatically given to here. And you have to promiscuous mode allow all. It means capture packets. In promiscuous mode, we allow the adapter to capture packets. So we allow that also in here. As such, in settings of this Rumnext Linux system, we keep it as an internal network. Zynet advanced, we keep it as promiscuous mode. Okay. So both these applications are running. What we have to do now is we have to allow communication between this Windows system and this Ubuntu system. That is one. I have already done that, but I'll show you how to do it again.
Configuration will be like all communication from the Windows or Windows or the victim machine will be going through the Rumnext, the analysis machine. So the Rumnext machine will be acting as a proxy. So all communication from that machine will be going through the analysis machine that we needed for the analysis of the malware. Okay, so I think everyone got it, right?
Yeah, anyone can, if they're having any doubts, they are doing with us. If we are going fast, we are not following, please let us know, because if we are sitting in a room and doing this, it will be very easy, but doing this way, it is hard for us to see or know what your guys are feeling about this session, or are you guys enjoying or having fun, or just simply sitting here. So any doubts? Should we move forward?
Yeah, you could move forward.
Okay, so now we'll talk about assigning
I think
IPs.
Mani, you could explain the network setting again. Shiva is asking about. So what we are going to do is like Mani, go back to the diagram, network diagram. So this is the structure, network structure. So the analysis machine is 10.0.0.1. Okay, and the Windows victim machine is 10.0.0.3. Okay, there is another machine, Linux machine. It's also Linux victim machine. We are not considering that in this session, because if we need any analysis of a Linux malware, we can use Linux virtual machine. As of now, we are using Windows virtual machine. Okay, so all the communication for the Windows virtual machine is transferring to Linux Remnex analysis machine. Okay, that's the overall structure. So to configure that, we have to create a separate network. Okay, it should be an isolated network. For that, Mani configured the virtual machine with a brand new network. So Mani, can you show that, like then creating a new virtual host, virtual network?
So what I did is there are so many ways of networking in virtualization. Okay, there is bridged adapter. Adapter means this will be acting as a host also. This particular OS will be acting as a host also. If it is a NAT, it is a network, internal network. um, when we give an internal network, this host system, this particular virtual machine won't be able to
Mani, I think you
operate.
could show how to create the internal network also, or the networks. It's in the settings, so you could create a new network that we named as innet, internal net.
Yeah.
You could show that how to create that internal network.
It's 12:30.
No, it is by default. By default, it will be given us. If we take the
Yeah.
settings and go to network, by default, it will be, if we go internal network, inet will be given as a name. Yeah,
Yeah.
for second adapter 2,
There is an option to name it.
yeah, we have an option to name it. If we want to name it as inet 2, you can name it. But this same name should be used by the other system also, which we have to be communicating to each other.
That's how it's get isolated.
Yes, that's how it is getting isolated right now, as of now, if you are giving both this internal network, these like OS operating systems, they act alone. This Windows 7 won't communicate to the SCADI host which I'm using. It won't communicate to Remex won't communicate to Windows 7, Remex won't communicate to Kali. So this is acting as three different computers in three different networks. It has no connection in between, which we are going to assign IPs, and we have to put up that like we have to give that, assign the IP, and make the communication networking possible. So what I'll do is I have to set up this Remnex as a gateway. So I'll go through that. This is what we do. We will be using Windows and Linux Remnex. So first of all, in Remnex, we have to install inetsim. Actually, inetsim is already in that.
Yeah,
It
iNetSim
is
is already pre-installed in
all
the machine.
pre-installed in this Linux machine, Remnex machine. What is inetsim is like what we can see is it as a network simulator. Okay, we'll be having a single computer, but this inetsim is this piece of software. It simulates a network for that other party. So that is the use of this one.
So what exactly it used to is like when we run the malware inside the Windows machine, it will be calling some IPs or some domains. It should maybe it will be the command and control for the malware. So when it try to access that URL, if as we are isolated in a isolated network, the call will not go outside the network and it will get a 404 error. So for that we simulate the entire network, like we put the inet sim. So whenever someone asks for a domain or a IP, it will provide with a default page. So and also we will get a log of what the malware asked for. So we'll get the complete details, the URL, and what are the parameters that malware used to send to that domain. That's why we use iNetSim as the network simulator in the Remnex or analysis machine.
Any doubts? Okay, so I hope you got what it is. And the second thing is Bob Suite, which we are not using as of for this one. We'll move forward. Setting up an isolated virtual network. What we can do to set up an isolated network is, like I said, it should be internal network. We can give any name you want. Like I said, here I gave a name as inet something. Yeah, inet. Then here it is given as malware analysis network. Okay. So we have to go to that interfaces of this file as root, and we have to set up this as a like static IP for this Linux machine. So what we'll do is we'll go to this Windows Linux machine. We'll network interfaces. So this is that file, configuration file, where we give this static IP for a Linux system. So what we'll do when you will open up this particular thing, well, first of all, what you have to do is you have to check your IP, like if give if config. You can see your name of your service here. Okay, so for some people it should be ETH0, some people ENP0S3. Sorry?
Interface name.
Yeah, interface. It changes with the people's network or what kind of hypervisor they are using. This changes. So you have to, first of all, you have to look into this. Okay, afterwards, you have to go to this configuration file. You have to set up this as a static IP for this particular interface. So this auto ENP0S3 iFace iNet static, we are putting IP as statics. IP address is 10.0.0.1 and netmarks is 255.255.255.0. So this will be our static IP address. After that, what we'll do is we'll save it, and we will ENP0S3. So we have restarted. We have to restart this file. What I'll done is, if down means we'll down the particular like disable the particular network interface. If up means we'll be upping that. So we'll be like enabling that. So after we enable this, we'll look for that IP. Before that, we'll be having a different IP. After we'll put it as static IP for this, and after setting up those, we'll be rewarded with if config. We'll be getting an IP as this. So our gateway IP is 10.0.0.1. Okay, this will be our analytic machine, and its IP is 10.0.0.1. We keep it as that way because we are going to use this particular machine as a gateway. So any n number of we are having 10 virtual machines to analyze our malware. Okay, all this traffic will be coming and hitting here 10.0.0.1. We'll be configuring all our other systems in a way to run like that. So anyone is having a doubt till now, any issues setting up this static IP for a Linux machine? Anyone didn't understand why we did this? What is the use of doing that? Any queries, any questions?
Okay, he could move forward.
Okay. So next thing what we have to do is we have to set up a static IP for this Windows machine, which is a victim machine, and we have to set up an IP, and we have to set the gateway to 10.0.0.1. So it is basic networking. What we'll do, we'll go to the networking of this Windows, open network sharing setting, local area connection. Okay, here. Okay, we'll go for properties, and in here we have to check in for Internet Protocol version 4 because we are using IP version 4, and we have to go configure.
Properties.
So sorry, it is properties, IP version 4 properties, and we have to check in, use the following IP. Most probably it will be obtain an IP address automatically because your DHCP server will be your virtual box. So what we have to do is we have to put up a static IP for that. IP will be 10.0.0.3, as I showed you that network diagram, and there will be subnet mask which is 255.255.255.0, and the default gateway. Like I said before, the default gateway will be 10.0.0.1, which will be the IP of that analyzing machine, which is a Linux machine, which we set up that like static IP a couple of minutes ago. Okay, now I think that you understand why we set up the IP there. And for DNS also, what we are doing is we are going to give it as the gateway address, which is 10.0.0.1. Okay, and we are gonna save it. And so if we check our IP, we are having an IP of 10.0.0.3, and our gateway is 10.0.0.1. So what we can do is we can test if we are having connection to that 10.0.0, but we are able to communicate to do. So we are getting ping props back. So any doubts till now? This, as of now, we will be able to access this application. This machine will be able to communicate to the Windows machine, but both these machines won't be able to communicate to the host machine, which is Kali. So I can see you that this is my Kali machine, which I'm using as a host.
It's fine.
See, this the IP is having 192.168.1.148. So what I'll do, I'll ping 10.0.0.1. It doesn't know what it is. That is redirecting.
It will get ping. It will get ping.
Yeah, it is getting pinged. I don't know. Yeah, most probably we have to ping from here to there. So 192.168. So this network, it is not reachable for this application. So from here, or from our malware infected Windows machine, which is this, it is not possible for, it's not possible for like anything to go out of this system because it is sandboxed. It is inside there. It won't be able to like uh, go past this and to the internet or the host system or affect the host system or something like that. So this is how you have to set up a lab. So is there anyone who's having any doubt or who didn't understand what we are doing, anything or any symbol or minor points which you have to make it clear? Anyone? Sylvia was having some doubts regarding this setting up an isolated network. Are you clear? Did you get it? Hello? Anyone? Okay. Okay. Yep. So we have already made setup of our lab. So this is our lab. Our lab structure is like I showed you here. We are having a Windows victim which has an IP of 10.3 and a Linux and analysis machine which is a Linux one. It is having IP of 10.1. So moving forward, I have covered all this till here. I have covered. This is for Ubuntu machine, which is another Linux victim machine, which is we are not looking into as of now. We have changed it. Okay, now we are talking about static malware analysis. Like I said before, static malware analysis is code review. We can simply say it as white box testing or a code review where you take the code of this particular malware, you read it, you look for malicious code like code snippets or something like that. Maybe some other includes or the behavioral changes, something like that, and you'll come to an understanding whether it is a malware or not. And for our particular piece of like a thing, we are not making sure that like we are not uh, looking into this static malware code analysis because um, it is not possible to complete static analysis course in a couple of hours or something like that. So we are skipping it. Lots of data is available publicly for anyone to search in Google. So you can check it there. Maybe there are a couple of books also for that. For basically for a malware code analysis, more than languages, we have to be quite sure about uh, tools like Grida. Then assembly code should be pretty much good at assembly code and all, because almost most of these malwares comes as compiled form, and in a compiled format. It is hard for us to read without knowing this assembly code. I hope you got that. Okay. So program analysis, we have to identify the type of executable. Like before I showed here, in the Windows file, we don't know what type of executable it is. Maybe it is a exe file, maybe it is a APK, maybe it is uh, like a Linux executable. So we don't know. So basically what we have to do, first of all, before analyzing, we have to analyze what it is, what type of executable it is. If it is an Android malware, probably it will be an APK. If it is for Windows, it will be an exe file, and if it is for Linux, it will be an ELF file. So this is a PE file format like mini.exe. What will be having is it is a DOS header. It is binary. As you can see, before we have checked in. If we put this in this PE Studio, we'll be able to check the DOS header and all. So you can see here it is a DOS header. Same DOS header is given here also. So there is a DOS header, there is PE header, program executable programs header. It is in modern binary signature machine characteristics, and there is an optional header. It could be there, it could be not there. It is executable information like address of like entry point, something like that. Then there is code. It will be a x6 assembly code equivalent to C code. So like I said, move EAX42, return 42. Like this is assembly code. Move EAX is assembly code, return is another assembly code, which we have to like be aware of the assembly code to know better about it. Then there is executable and linkable format, which is mainly used for Linux type of thing. So dot/mini. It will be having an ELF header. You can e-indent, e-type, e-machine, e-version. There is program header table. These headers are different. And code. It is also in x86 assembly code, like I said before, equivalent to C code. So for PE, like for exe file and PE, like executable lingual format, there's headers and it's like a format is a little bit different, but kind of same also. So it gets different. For if it is an APK, it will be entirely different, because APK it is a compressed file format and it is not a compiled kind of thing. So analyzing APK malwares are bit more easy than with an ELF or an EXE file. So any doubts? Any doubts, guys, till now? Raja, do you have anything to add on this?
No, no, good, good. If anyone having any questions, we can clarify.
Anybody? Okay, here we are explaining that portable executable files, what it is. Okay, portable executable is basically Windows executable object code, Windows DLL files, Windows, those all are called portable executable files. And it is having headers and sections. So PE file headers can consume more information than just imports. So these headers, they'll be having more informations regarding this PE file. So PE headers, they contain the imports functions from other libraries, exports functions in the malware that are meant to be called by other programs. Because imports means we are taking something from another program, some piece of code, and executing it. And export means we are letting another piece of program run our code, run the malware's code. So we in headers we can look into import, exports, time data stamp, time it was compiled, things like that. Sections, name of sections, subsystems, resources like strings, icons, menus, something like that. We can find all these stuff in PE headers. If we go for PE sections, we can see .text file, which is obviously contains that executable code, R data for read-only data for global accessibility and all. Dot data stores global data. .rc resources stores resources and needed by executables. These all can be found in PE sections. So like I said before, all these sections, things which we can used using, like we can viewed using different type of tools, which is PE view, PE ID, PE studio, PE resource. I have given a couple of tools in it. If you can check it in this the file which we handed over, there are tools, decompilers, forensics tools are there, then hex editors, networking tools. So PE tools are there. In here you can find the PE ID. There is PE studio. So if you're having any like issues finding these tools, I think almost all the tools which we are showing up this in here, which is already given to you, you can download it from the link. So if you are finding any issues, you can find me in my LinkedIn and send me request, or in Discord also, I can help you around with these resources. So moving forward, taking baby steps, looking for strings. Like I said, if I come to this here, first of all, if we get a malware, we put it up, we look for libraries, we look for imports, we look for strings. Before executing it, we'll find so many things from doing these things. Like, okay, so Like I said, there are a couple of things which is asking send your Bitcoin, send 300 rupees, 300 dollars and all. So from strings, from imports and from libraries, we'll be getting so many things. After that, the second thing which is explain, calculate the hash of the executable and look in VirusTotal. Like everybody knows what to do here. So what we'll do is we'll go to an executable. We'll go to a sample here, Windows sample, Tesla crypt. Here is a Tesla crypt. So I'm making the MD5 hash of it to check it with VirusTotal. So I'll lose MD5, some file name is this. So I'll get the MD5 hash of this file. So I'll copy this MD5 hash from here and I'll go to VirusTotal. You can drop a file here. You can find a URL, give a URL here to check if it is malicious in nature. You can drop a file to check whether it is malicious in nature, and you can also give this hashed code also, so it can check. So I gave this hashed code and community score is 66 out of, so it is critical. So if I check here, everybody it is saying Trojan Win32 ransom, Tesla crypt. So by this way, bit different, Avira, Avast, by different virus like antivirus companies, softwares, they are giving, they have like already marked it as a what I can say, a virus, a malicious piece of software, a malware. So we can see, you can see Kaspersky also, Max McAfee also. It is saying that it is Tesla crypt. We just gave a MD5 hash of it, and we are getting, without even giving the file, we are getting this much data regarding it. So VirusTotal is a very helpful thing, and it will let us know if there is if it is a highly visible, highly used kind of malware. We'll be able to get it back from here, from VirusTotal. So any doubts, guys? Anything? Any doubts regarding how to hash? What is this hashing? What we are doing here? Anything about VirusTotal? Okay, fine. Yeah, this is how we calculate this hash. We can calculate different type of hashes actually. This place we can SHA-1. We can also calculate SHA-1 also. Okay, this is actually, this one is the same SHA-1 file name, so there is no need to. See, we are getting the same thing. Yeah, for SHA-1 also, for MD5 also, will be getting the same result, and everyone is showing it is Tesla crypt, and we know it is Tesla crypt because we are using it. See. Okay, so any doubts till now? I'm feeling kind of bored. Nobody is saying anything. Hello, anyone? Okay, so I'll move forward. Okay, dynamic malware analysis. Dynamic malware analysis is a way where we interact with this mm, particular what we can say, interact with this particular malware and come to know if it is calling for any any user or any domains or an IPs, or if it is doing things internally, because if it is not going out for any call or taking help from anyone outside the network, then most probably it will be easy for us to reverse it, and maybe reverse the damage it has done also. So before doing any kind of that, we'll check the connectivity from our Windows system to our Linux system. So what I'll do is I'll take the Linux system. I'll start Wireshark. I hope everyone is aware of Wireshark. Is anyone not aware of Wireshark and what it doesn't do? Okay, so basically Wireshark is a packet capturing software. So what it does is this application captures all the traffic which is going through this application. So I'll come to this Windows. This is my Linux box. I'll come to Windows. It is having not any traffic because we are not using it. Now we are getting traffic from 10.0.0.3 to 10.0.0.1. It is a DNS request. DNS request means it's a whois lookup, like you can see. Here it is, Microsoft.com. And there is an ICMP request, which is a ping, as you can know. There's an ERP request who has 10101. So basically, these are the captures, like packets which are coming from 1003 to 10.0.1. 10.0.0.3 to 10.0.0.1. Okay. So before doing anything, we have to check whether it is working or not, because without connectivity, we won't be able to test this. So the next thing we have to do is we have to start a HTTP server in here. So HTTP D start, and accept all IPs start. Okay, what both these things do is HTTP HTTP-D means it spawns a HTTP server in our Linux system. Okay, so there is a HTTP server in our system right now. If we do an nmap on it, we'll come to know. And accept all IPs means all the IPs, which is, let it be 10.0.0.1, 10.0.0.2, 10.0.0.3, any IP is making a HTTP request to this particular server, it is going to respond with a 200 OK. So what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to capture the request which is made by this 10.0.0.1 malware to this particular who he is calling. Let it be a public IP, a private IP, or public IP or someone, or a domain name of someone. Any request which is coming through 10.0.0.1 will be captured by 10.0.0.3, and we will be able to do things with it. I'm not able to like show what all things we can do, but we will be going through how we will be able to capture this data using Wireshark. Okay, Wireshark is a minimal tool. There are better tools like Bubsuit or OWASP SAP, which will be able to capture all the data and like will be capture the request and will be able to make like changes to the request and send it forward to that whomever he is calling, like this malware is calling the server or the domain or the IP, where the attackers command and control. We can craft data and maybe we can we can hack the hacker kind of thing. So basically for this situation, we are doing only basic data search. So what I'll doing, I'll go to my Windows system. And I'm going to infect this ransomware. It's okay. So not Petya. I'll try Tesla Crypt. For everyone's know, the ransomware's password is infected. So malware. So I'm gonna export it to desktop. The zip, all the malware zip files password is infected. Okay, I have already given it in the chat box. You can copy from there. It is infected, and what I'm going to do is if I double click, it won't run. Why? Because it is not having an extension. So just rename it. We'll give an extension exe.exe. We'll run it. So do we have changes progress in the program to make any changes to computer? Yes. Okay, your personal files are encrypted. So as of now, see, you can see everything changed. CryptoLocker, something came up. My, what I can say, my screensaver, my display picture has changed. There is a file there's a program which I can't close, which is saying that your personal files are encrypted. Okay, so I'll see show files here. So it is showing all the files, log.html, malware, app data, roaming. So I'll check this process.html, process hacker. I'll take this process hacker. I'll look what's happening with here. It is Firefox Explorer. See whether there is any interesting kind of, what is this client server runtime process? So I guess these two winlogon.exe, csrss.exe is the kind of that vulnerability which is running now. So we can check the properties, modules, statistics, environment. This is in a real world scenario. This is the way we will be looking into a malware. So in threats, we'll check if it is anything is input output statistics in general. So we'll be checking all these file names, all these properties, and see if anything is interesting for us or anything is not interesting. So we can do file description. We won't be able to reach this application because we are not in this internet. Click free description site. No way, nothing is happening there. So it is already encrypted. What we'll do is we'll go for the Linux machine. We'll check if an HTTP request or any name server request. From 3. If we can see, it's a UDP packet. There is nothing serious in it. So likewise, I can see the protocol DNS here, ICMP here. Likewise, if this application is going to make any kind of HTTP request, it should be it should be showing here as some kind of technical issues. It's not showing here now, but it should be showing here. So we can like by like all these applications, we can follow it, we can check it whether what it is doing, what kind of data it is transferring, or to which URL, which IP, and if it is sharing our details, our password, username, password, or something like that. We are using a minimal tool for this to like explain this or show you this, which is Wireshark. There is another tool called Burpsuit or proxy, which is SAP proxy, Burpsuit proxy, where you can probably you can take those requests and you can edit those requests and you can send forward to this attacker's command and control, where you will be we will be having a much more control over this. In here, it is we will be just able to view the packets and what it is doing. We won't be able to edit the packets, like edit the request, what request it is, edit it, change that forms, maybe duplicate it or something like that. So this much is what we have planned to do for this session. So anyone is having any doubts regarding till now? Rajat, do you have anything to add to this?
I think you could show the iNetSim workflow also. You could run the iNetSim and run the application. So it will get all the records in the itself.
I have already.
You could go through the configurations of iNetSim. I think the next slides explains it.
Let's see.
Yep, that's one.
Okay. So this is a configuration file for iNetSim. Here couple of services are here, HTTPS, TTPS, the IRC. So this comes a service bind address, which is already 000, which I have already given it. I've changed from 10.0.0.1 to 10.0.0.0.0. And we come down.
So move up, Mani.
Yeah.
So, iNetSim will simulate these protocols like listed in the top. Bit more. Yeah.
HTTP, HTTPS, SMTP.
SMTP, SMTP, yes, POP3, POP3S, FTP, FTPS. Also, we could enable DNS also. DNS one, first one. And then also we could enable whatever protocol you want to simulate. It will simulate. The iNet protocol will simulate that protocol. Okay, go to the slide. So yeah, first configure this iNetSim configuration, then disable the service and enable it.
Yeah.
Run those commands.
Wait a second.
I think it's already disabled.
Yeah, it is already disabled. some networking issue, something that's why we are not able to capture this HTTP request, HTTP or HTTPS request. We have like a bit more time. We can sit over it and we have to like debug it and fix it. But actually, we are not having that much time with us. So basically, we have come to an end to this session. If you guys have any doubts, anything to ask for more about this, can you please come forward? Any kind of questions, anything related to this will be fine. Actually, we planned this particular session to be
Half day event, yeah, half day session.
for a half day session, but we are not out of time. Any technique to dodge SSL pinning? SSL pinning, yes. Does malware come with SSL pinning? I have never seen. Braja, are you aware of?
No, not always. But are you asking about SSL pinning in application like iOS, Android, kind of?
Okay. Okay. Actually, we can do it. There are Frida. You know the tool named Frida. There is a tool. It can capture the process. Like it can hook the process, and you can run JavaScript, the custom JavaScript code which is available in GitHubs and all, and you can bypass SSL pinning or root detection like that. Then there are a couple of other things. You can downgrade the mobile, like downgrade the device which you are using, and install. I have to check which software it is. I'll get back to you, Ruben, because I know which software it is. There is
In Android, it pretty much simple. You could bypass any SSL pinning. But
and,
for iOS, there is some limitations. In some cases, it won't be possible.
yeah, in Android, almost 90% of the cases we will be able to bypass SSL pinning, because in Android, in perspective of Android, giving like putting up a root detection or a SSL pinning is actually doesn't have any use, because in one way or another we will be able to bypass it. And you can check the tool Frida for that. It is a really cool tool. You have to install a client side kind of server kind of thing in your device, and you have to configure like that. It is very cool. We will be able to maybe bypass so many things with this Frida, not just SSL pinning and root detection. Any other questions related to anything like cybersecurity or something, or related to this? Anybody?
Yeah, Silva, that question you should ask in Discord channel. I maybe Ade or someone from the core team could answer that. So, anyone having any other question regarding the malware analysis or in cybersecurity space? We got another 8, yep, 10 minutes. Money, you could show that you could run the inet sim and run the malware, so you'll see the request passing through the inet sim itself.
I tried it, but it is not going to. I don't know why. Actually, in the morning it was working fine.
So if everything fine, can we wind up, or if you have any questions or doubts to clarify, you can ask now. Else we could wind up.
Okay, guys, I I hope nobody is having any doubts.
So anyone from the organizers, uh, can we wind up? Vina, Ruben.
Okay. Reja and Mani, thanks for your training class. It's very awesome. I think most of us can learn one or many things
Uh,
from
uh,
you guys.
Okay, regarding the slides, it's available in my website. It's public. You could go there and view it. I'll share the link here itself. It's in my website.
Which one? BeagleSecurity.com?
The slides, the slide we
Okay, you
use.
mean slide.
Yeah, someone was asking about this slide.
Okay, I will forward this link in the Discord too. Okay. Is it all, Mani and Reja?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you all. Thanks for joining this call. It was a wonderful opportunity to have a talk with you guys. I understand this was a bit fast because we made this session for a 6 hour session. So I was going through a bit fast and trying to cover almost all things which we are having here. So I hope it was not boring or any of you guys have any doubts with this. I have already given mine and Reja's LinkedIn accounts in this chat, so you guys can connect to us anytime you want. We are happy to help you. Okay, thanks a lot then. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.
Yeah,
bye.
thanks. We appreciate your effort, Mani and Reja.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Okay,
Yeah.
guys. I think we conclude our training class for threat hands-on and threat hunter. So see you again in the next sessions at 3. Just PM me if
Sure,
you
yeah.
have any link for the next sessions. Okay, thanks all.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot.
Okay.